Welcome to another video from Demystifying Proposals. Our mission is to break down the proposal process and make proposals make sense. In this video, we touch on the basics of business development. It's important for anyone working in the proposal space to understand the context of proposals. If you learned something from this video, please hit the thumbs up to like the video. Subscribe to our channel and click on the bell to be notified of future videos. If you'd like to leave a comment, please do so as well. The following are some basic vocabulary that you need to know in order to do business development at federal government contractors. An RFI, or request for information, is part of how the government does market research. Usually, the RFI asks for government contractors' reactions to how the government intends to procure the work, or the statement of work, or the performance work statement. A sources sought notice is similar to an RFI. It's also part of how the government does market research, but it's usually used to identify if there are enough small businesses who can do the work to justify making the RFP a small business set aside. An RFP, or request for proposal, is what the government issues when they want to engage government contractors to do the work. Maybe it may be used for services, or it may be used for IT bids. An RFQ, or request for quote, usually is used for product bids, where the government is just trying to buy something, quote, off the shelf, like software or equipment. An unrestricted procurement means that any government contractor can bid, though it's usually intended for large or mid-tier companies to bid. A small business set-aside means only small businesses can bid. Sometimes these are restricted to a particular type of small business. We'll talk about that on the next slide. On this slide, we talk about various small business types. Small businesses that can bid on the small business set-asides we talked about on the previous slide. Small businesses are set by their NAICS codes. NAICS codes means North American Industry Classification System, which is the government's way of classifying various industries. If you need more information about NAICS codes, you should look on the SBA website. There's a lot of information there. An 8A company is under the 8A program, which is a robust 9-year program created to help firms owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. The government sets aside about 5% of procurements for these companies. Small disadvantaged businesses, which is about 10% of all federal contracting dollars, or roughly $50 billion in contracts, means that the firm must be 51% owned and controlled by one of those disadvantaged people. The disadvantaged person or persons must be socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged. Women-owned small businesses and economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses are generally offered about 5% of federal contracts. That is, those are contracts that are set aside for women-owned small businesses or economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. These businesses must be at least 51% owned and controlled by women who are U.S. citizens. They must have women manage day-to-day operations who also make long-term decisions. Veteran-owned small businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses must be at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more veteran or service-disabled veteran in the case of service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. They must have one or more veteran managing day-to-day operations who make the long-term decisions. Eligible veterans must have a service-connected disability to qualify as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Historically underutilized business zones, or hub zones as most people call them, get about 3% of federal contracts set aside for them. They must be at least 51% owned and controlled by U.S. citizens a community development corporation, an agricultural cooperative, an Alaskan Native corporation, a Native Hawaiian organization, or an Indian tribe. They must have their principal offices located in a hub zone, that is, a historically underutilized business zone. And about 35% of their employees have to live in a hub zone as well. That makes them a challenging small business to develop. Next, we're going to talk about how the government buys. There are GWACs, IDIQs, and task order proposals. We're going to talk about each of those. Government contracting vehicle types. There are various vehicles that enable the government departments and agencies to limit competition. Think of them as a pre-award competition. Only companies who have won a seat on a vehicle can submit proposals for the RFPs that come out under that vehicle. In contrast, full and open procurements means that the procurement is open to all government contractors, large and small. This, as you can imagine, often creates a lot of competition. So agencies and government departments prefer to use GWACs and IDIQs and BPAs that limit the competition to a select group of government contractors. GWACs, or government-wide acquisition contracts, can be used by any department and any agency across the federal government. There's often a fee for using them that the procurer pays, the organization putting out the RFP. An example of a GWAC is OASIS. It's a very common vehicle used across the federal government. OASIS stands for One Acquisition Solution for Integrated Services. This is a GWAC that was put out by the General Services Administration. It is not intended to be used for IT services, however, and it will be sunsetted in 2025. The replacement for OASIS is called OASIS Plus. OASIS Plus proposals have been submitted and awards are expected in third quarter of 2024 and fourth quarter of 2024. As I said, it's the follow-on to the OASIS vehicle. Alliant is currently active. Alliant 2 is currently active. Alliant 3 RFP is expected in sometime in 2024. There is a draft RFP currently out, and many companies are preparing for their Alliant 3 procurement. Alliant, unlike OASIS, is generally for IT services. So the companies that bid on Alliant may also be on OASIS or OASIS Plus, but many companies that are on OASIS or OASIS Plus may not be on Alliant because they may not have enough IT work to qualify them for Alliant. Another IT-oriented GWAC is the Chief Information Officer Solutions and Partners GWAC, or CIOSP as we call it. CIOSP 3 is currently active. CIOSP 4 is currently under protest, but we are hoping that it will become active later in 2024. Another GWAC is the NASA SOUP. SOUP stands for Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement. The current SOUP procurement is SOUP 5. However, SOUP 6 has come out and is expected to be awarded later in 2024. In addition to GWACs, there are things called IDIQs. IDIQs are usually at the department or agency level. And IDIQ stands for Indefinite Delivery, Indefinite Quantity. So they are open in terms of the kinds of work that can be procured under them. They can be single award, which means that only one contractor gets the work under the vehicle, or they can be multiple award, which means that there are several government contractors who are available to bid on that IDIQ. An example of this is the Department of Energy Saving Performance Contract, or ESPC. Another example of an IDIQ is the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services Strategic Partners Acquisition Readiness Contract, or CMS Spark. These are both examples of a IDIQ at the department level. Then there are also blanket purchase agreements, or BPAs. BPAs have finite budgets and are often used to buy limited services or products, which are predefined when the procurement is let out. An agency must define the budget, and once the budget is used, the agency can no longer purchase using that BPA. This contrasts them with IDIQs, which are often defined but broadly, more broadly than a BPA, and the ceiling can be raised on an IDIQ. So they can, if they are still actively using that IDIQ, but they've put out enough procurements that they've overrun their budget, they can add to their budget if they need to. So those are the different kinds of government contracting vehicles. Because as I said, most agencies and departments prefer to use vehicles. Most proposals that government contractors do are task order proposals. So those are RFPs that are issued under either a GWAC or an IDIQ, but only the companies that have gotten an award under that GWAC or IDIQ can bid on the task order proposal that's been issued under that GWAC or IDIQ. That often means that the number of companies bidding will be limited to 3 to 5 companies, particularly for IDIQs that are often limited to 3 to 5 companies. Task order proposals are also often very page limited. Offers can submit only a set number of pages for the whole proposal or for each section of the proposal. Task order proposals are often also a quick turnaround. Usually that's about 30 days or 4 weeks, but sometimes the timelines are even shorter. The process of business development has several phases. The first phase is corporate strategy. The second phase is often leads, followed by qualified leads. Next is capture and pre-proposal development. Finally, there's proposal development. This is the business development funnel from every opportunity that's available across the federal government to those that you will actually submit a proposal on. Narrowing the number of opportunities is part of the business development process. And it starts with what your corporate strategy is, which is developed by the company leadership. Then the next phase is usually lead. This narrows the number of opportunities. And at this point, most of the opportunities are put in a customer relationship management system, or CRM. The BD leaders and the account leads generally are the ones who figure out what those opportunities are and start to develop them. Once they've developed them more fully, they'll develop them as a qualified lead. And qualified opportunities means that they've been through a step review or a gate review. We'll talk about that more later. In the next phase, we call it capture or pre-proposal development. In this phase, it's strategic capture and capture managers who lead the opportunities to continue to develop them, to develop the capture strategy, and to execute on that capture strategy. In the final phase of the business development funnel is proposal development. Here, the proposal manager leads the pursuit of this stage of the funnel. And that means leading proposal development until you get to proposal submission. We'll talk about all of these phases in more detail on the next slides. So here's some more details on corporate strategy. People often forget about this part of business development because you sort of take it for granted that your company has a corporate strategy and you may or may not be focused on it depending on where you are in your position within the company. But it's important to think about as you're doing business development. Which departments and which agencies is your company focused on? Is there a particular agency or particular department that you prefer to work with? Some companies are very focused on Department of Defense, for example. Other companies don't particularly want to work with the Department of Defense. They prefer to work with some of the other agencies in the federal government. It's really up to the company, and that's part of where your corporate strategy comes in. Also, does your company provide services or products? Obviously, the federal government needs both. They need to procure products and they need to procure services. So, what is your corporate strategy? Which are you going to do? You can do both, but most companies pick one or the other. And then within services, does your company provide professional services or IT services? What I mean by professional services is that that's the kind of um, work that is often in a program management office, for example, where they're supporting a department or an agency with things like managing their procurements or managing their workers, and often that work is set aside for small businesses. Professional services may also include work considered staff augmentation, where the government just needs people to do the work, right? The federal government doesn't always hire as many people as it needs, and sometimes it only needs people for a short period of time. And so they may put out a procurement that they're staff augmentation. Professional services also may include specialized staff, such as scientists or financial and accounting folks or economists. Again, this may be supplemental to the people who already work for the federal government, but that's what professional services generally means. IT services, on the other hand, mean building systems or upgrading systems for the government. So you may design an IT system, or if the government already has one, maybe they need to upgrade it to the latest and greatest technologies. Right now, a lot of that is around the cloud, but there's AI. So those are the kinds of things that an upgraded system might require. Understanding what your company's mission and vision is will help you with understanding your company's business development choices. This is the top of the funnel where the company has identified the full breadth of opportunities. To help narrow down the list from every possibility for every organization that you might be interested in pursuing and every opportunity that is professional services or IT services, whichever your company might be, you start looking at things like this pursuit quad chart. So, looking at this quad chart, you have both solutions and customers. So, the easy button is often what we would call a recompete, where you already have that work and you're just going to try and win it again. So it's the same customer, it's a solution you've perfected, same customer, same solution, easy decision. Those you almost always are going to continue to continue to pursue. Next on the bar for solutions is a new customer. In this case, you're offering a different customer a solution you've perfected for another customer. In order to be successful with this new customer, call plans are key. You need to meet with the customer. You need to understand what their decision making process looks like, what their um, hot buttons might be. How exactly are they going to use this solution differently than the customer you already have? So it's a different customer, but it's the same solution. Moving across on the customer arrow, you might have a new solution that you're offering to a customer that you already work with. So this is an example of where the expression everyone works for BD comes in, because oftentimes the people who are working for the easy button customers, the customers where you already have the work and you already have the solution, that customer may say, we need somebody to do this, or we need somebody to do that. And if it's something that your company can do or does for another customer, maybe for that same customer, you can offer a different solution and expand the work that your customer is doing. Again, this is an adjacent work, and it's another way to pursue business for the same customer, but with a slightly different solution, or maybe a very different solution, depending on what your customer needs. The white space, which is all the way up on the solution axis and all the way across on the customer axis, is the hardest to pursue and generally not recommended for business developers. In this case, it's both a different customer and a different solution. So there's no familiarity here. It would be all new customer, all new solution. It's possible to pursue these, but it's a very, very challenging. Continuing down the next phase of the funnel, there are leads. In most company, it's the job of people called BD leads or account managers to fill the top of the funnel. And then they use various methods to find leads, like GovWin or Bloomberg. Following the business strategy, they search for opportunities for customers the company is interested in pursuing. And following the business strategy, they search for opportunities that fit the kind of work the company can do. Those two elements of that quad chart we just looked at. The number of opportunities in the funnel has now narrowed. Qualified leads. The BD lead or the account manager continue to explore the possibilities of the leads that we talked about on the previous slide. If the incumbent is vulnerable, for example, that may present an opportunity for you to pursue that work. Or if it's new work and the budget matches the kind of work that your company does, that may also represent an opportunity. Once the leads have been vetted or explored to be sure that they make sense for the company to spend resources to pursue, the BD lead or the account manager brings the lead forward for a review. This is usually called a gate review or a step review in most companies. They will present all the information known so far. They'll present what still needs to be determined, and then leadership determines whether the opportunity should become qualified. There will be fewer opportunities that continue on from here. A qualified lead usually means the opportunity moves to be managed by a capture manager, not a BD lead or an account manager. In the capture or pre-proposal development phase, the assigned capture manager continues to work on the opportunity. They try and get the information for the things we don't know that we didn't know when the opportunity was qualified. They confirm what we thought we knew to be sure it's still right. And they try and meet with the customer to see whether the information we know is accurate from the customer's perspective and to find out more about the customer, particularly if it's a new customer, what their hot buttons are or what they really care about and why are they asking somebody to do this work. They talk about possible solutions to see whether the company's possible solutions will meet the customer's needs. An opportunity can be in this phase for months, even years. An opportunity doesn't usually move into the final phase until an RFP actually drops. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be working on it. You need to find companies that may fill the gaps in your solution. If you don't have all of the pieces, maybe another company does, and you might want to partner with them. If there's a draft RFP or even a draft SOW or statement of work, you want to take the time to not only make sure your solution fits what that statement of work says, but also to get your ideas and solution down on paper. This is also an ideal time to work on resumes for key personnel and past performance, which need to be tailored for the RFP's requirements. In the proposal development phase, the proposal manager becomes the person in charge when the RFP comes out. The capture manager should stay active and should continue to participate in the proposal development process because they need to ensure that the teaming strategy is completed and understood by all the authors as the proposal continues to be developed. They need to ensure the pricing strategy is pursued by the pricing team. Usually during the capture phase, we've come to understand what the budget from the government might be, and we need to make sure that whatever we're going to bid matches that. That's the pricing strategy. They also need to make sure that the win themes and discriminators that they developed in the capture phase are understood by the authors and captured in the proposal. And they need to help the proposal manager with getting all the parts and pieces done. It's usually a pretty quick turn, and all the help is necessary to get it done. The program manager is usually the person who will run the program when the work is won or if the work is won. They should also be involved in the proposal development process because they need to ensure that the pricing strategy is realistic, the solution is realistic, and they need to help with staffing, usually especially with key personnel and finding the right people to meet the government's requirements. In a perfect world, a company pursues only opportunities that have been through the other phases of business development. Opportunities that don't, opportunities that we haven't qualified or we haven't done capture on, are called bluebirds and should be pursued only with extreme care. In the proposal development phase, the proposal manager has a lot to organize. There's a compliance matrix and an outline, which are based on what the RFP's requirements are. They need to develop a schedule, checking with contracts and pricing folks on their deliverables. The schedule is based on what the RFP deadlines are. They need to organize a kickoff meeting with help from the capture manager and the program manager on who should attend. But don't forget to invite contracts and pricing. They're important for the process. And then you set up daily stand-ups, depending on the opportunity. Those are held daily or several times a week. We call them daily stand-ups regardless of whether they're held daily or several times a week. With the capture manager, the proposal manager should make sure that there are enough authors and that the authors know what they're responsible for. The proposal manager should also monitor the writing to be sure that it's on track and compliant, and, as importantly, to make sure it's compelling. There are other trainings that talk about those things specifically, should you have interest in learning what compliant means and what compelling means. They also set up and conduct color team reviews. Generally speaking, government contractors use the Shipley method, and that involves pink team, red team, gold team, and white glove. They also want to coordinate the submission timing with contracts and pricing. Pricing will be developing the pricing information, which is usually one of the last things done in the proposal development process because you need to understand what your solution is, you need to understand what your key personnel are, and all of those things often don't come together until towards the end of the process. So pricing is usually involved all the way through the proposal development process and need to know when the submission dates are. Contracts is who usually submits the proposal. So obviously, it's very important to coordinate all of that with them, but they also need to be involved in looking at the proposal itself. And so again, you need to make sure that your timing is understood by contracts and pricing. So everybody's on the same page. And then after proposal development, after proposal submission, often the proposal manager will lead a lessons learned for continuous improvement on the proposal development process. I hope you enjoyed learning more about Business Development 101 from Demystifying Proposals. Thank you for your time.